as an invisible and unwanted Omega in the Cold River Pack. Harper believed she was merely performing an act of mercy when she dragged 15 frozen, dying wolves into her garage during a record-breaking blizzard. It was a choice that would inadvertently change history. Unbeknownst to her, the massive wounded black wolf watching her every move wasn't a wild animal at all. He was Dominic Sterling, the ruthless alpha king of the Western Territories, currently being hunted by her own pack. Harper was about to learn that sometimes the monster you save is the only one who can save you back. The thermometer outside the kitchen window read 40 degrees below zero. But inside the pack house of the Cold River Pack, the atmosphere was even colder. Harper wiped her raw, chapped hands on her apron. It was Christmas Eve, 2024. While the high-ranking members of the pack were upstairs in the grand hall, toasting with expensive champagne and laughing under crystal chandeliers. Harper was down in the scullery, scrubbing grease off baking sheets. She was 22 years old, an Omega who had been orphaned at 6 and subsequently demoted to the status of a glorified servant. In the hierarchy of Cold River, she was lower than the dirt on the Alpha's boots. Harper. The kitchen door banged open. It was Brody, the pack's beta. He was a thick-necked man with a cruel smile and a penchant for kicking things that couldn't fight back. Alpha Silas says the garage isn't cleared out for the guests' SUVs. Move your rust bucket Jeep. Now. But Brody, Harper said, her voice trembling slightly. It's a whiteout out there. The news said no one should go outside for more than 5 minutes. My Jeep won't start in this. I don't care, Brody sneered, stepping into her personal space. He smelled of whiskey and arrogance. Move it to the old shed by the tree line, or I'll have the boys tow it into the ravine. The old shed was half a mile away. In this storm, that walk back could be fatal for an Omega with a weak wolf spirit. But looking at Brody's eyes, Harper knew he hoped she wouldn't make it back. Yes, Beta, she whispered. She grabbed her thin, frayed coat, a hand-me-down from 3 seasons ago, and stepped out into the biting wind. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. The wind howled through the pines of the Yukon Territory, a sound like 1,000 screaming ghosts. It took her 10 minutes to get her old Jeep started, and another 20 to crawl it through the snowdrifts to the dilapidated shed at the edge of the property. The shed was essentially a ruin, 3 walls, and a sagging roof offering zero protection from the wind. She parked the car and prepared for the death march back to the main house. But just as she stepped out, a flash of movement caught her eye near the frozen creek. Wolves. Not shifters. At least they didn't move like shifters. They weren't walking with the arrogance of men in wolf suits. They were huddled together, a mass of grey and black fur half buried in a snowbank. They weren't moving. Harper froze. Pack law stated that stray wolves were to be ignored or shot on sight to prevent disease. But Harper felt a tug in her chest, a painful empathy. She knew what it was like to be left out in the cold. She squinted against the stinging snow. There were so many of them. At 15. She took a step closer. The wind shifted, bringing a scent of metallic copper. Blood. Fresh blood. Hey! She called out, her voice snatched away by the gale. The pile of fur shifted. A massive head rose from the center. It was a black wolf larger than any she had ever seen, even larger than Alpha Silas. His eyes were a piercing, glowing gold, but they were dim with exhaustion. A deep gash ran down his flank, matting his obsidian fur with crimson. He looked at her, and then his head dropped back onto his paws. He was resigning himself to death. Harper looked back toward the warm lights of the pack house, barely visible through the storm. If she left them, they would be dead by morning. If she helped them, and Alpha Silas found out, she would be dead by morning. "Damn it!" she hissed. She ran back to the shed. It was useless. She looked at her jeep. It was small, but the back seats folded down. She returned to the wolves. "You have to help me," she shouted over the wind, grabbing the scruff of the nearest grey wolf. It whined, its body rigid with hypothermia. For the next hour, Harper fought the storm. She dragged, pushed, and carried 15 massive animals into the back of her jeep and the small attached trailer she used for hauling trash. She worked with a manic energy, her fingers going numb, her face burning. The last one was the giant black wolf. He was too heavy. "Come on," she grunted, slipping in the snow, her arms wrapped around his massive torso. "I'm not letting you die here. Not tonight." The wolf groaned, a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. With a surge of adrenaline, fueled by sheer desperation, she heaved him onto the tailgate. He scrambled weakly, his claws scratching the metal until he collapsed inside. Harper slammed the hatch, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She drove the short distance to the garage, not the main luxury garage, but her living quarters. It was a converted maintenance room attached to the boiler house hidden from the main estate. She backed the jeep right up to her door. It was 2:00 a.m. by the time she had them all inside. Her room was small, just a bed, a hot plate, and a rug, but it was warm thanks to the boiler next door. The 15 wolves filled every inch of floor space. The smell of wet fur, pine, and blood was overwhelming. Harper moved among them like a ghost. She had no medical supplies. Those were reserved for the warriors, so she used what she had. She tore up her old bedsheets for bandages. She boiled water on her hot plate to clean their wounds. She started with the smaller ones. They were clearly subordinates protecting the center. Many had gunshot wounds, silver bullets. Hunter's Harper wondered, digging a silver slug out of a grey wolf's shoulder with her tweezers. The wolf whimpered but didn't snap. No hunters don't use military-grade rounds. This was a hit, a planned execution. Finally, she reached the black wolf. He had taken the corner of the room, watching her with those intense golden eyes. He hadn't slept. He tracked her every movement, judging, calculating. "You're the leader, aren't you?" Harper whispered, kneeling before him. He let out a huff, steam rising from his nose. His wound was bad, a jagged tear across his ribs. She reached out to touch it, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. It wasn't just a warning. It was a command. "Do not touch." "I can't help you if you eat me," Harper said softly, not breaking eye contact. "And if I don't clean that, the infection will kill you before the cold does. Is that what you want? Did you survive the ambush just to die on an Omega's rug?" The wolf stared at her. For a long moment the silence stretched heavy and suffocating. Then slowly the tension left his shoulders. He laid his head down on her knee, exposing the wound. It was an act of submission, or perhaps trust. Harper didn't question it. She worked for hours, cleaning, stitching, and bandaging. She fed them the venison stew she had been saving for her own Christmas dinner, 3 months of savings gone in 10 minutes. When she was done, she was exhausted. She curled up in the only empty spot left, curled right against the black wolf's back for warmth. "Merry Christmas," she whispered into his fur. Dominic Sterling, the Alpha King, lay awake long after the girl's breathing evened out. He was in shock. His convoy had been hit 10 miles south by mercenaries using pack jamming tech. His Beta Gabriel was unconscious 3 feet away. His Gamma Lucas was bleeding out near the door. He had expected to die in that snowbank. He had expected the cold river pack territory he was currently passing through to finish the job the mercenaries started. Instead, he was in a boiler room, patched up with strips of flannel sheets, his stomach full of cheap stew being used as a pillow by a girl who smelled like lavender and sorrow. He sniffed her hair. She was an Omega. No pack markings, which meant she hadn't been claimed or acknowledged. But her spirit, it was resilient. She had dragged 15 fully grown warrior wolves through a blizzard. Dominic felt a strange sensation in his chest. His wolf, usually a creature of rage and dominance, was purring. "She is ours," his wolf whispered. "Not yet," Dominic thought. "First we survive." The morning sun didn't break. The storm had just turned the sky a lighter shade of grey. Harper woke up with a stiff neck and a warm body, pressing her into the floor. She opened her eyes to see a massive black paw draped over her waist. Panic surged instantly. "The wolves! I hid wolves in my room." She scrambled up. The wolves were awake. Most of them were sitting up looking significantly better than they had the night before. Shifter healing was fast provided they were warm and fed. The black wolf, however, was gone. "Where is he?" she muttered. The bathroom door creaked open. Harper gasped and backed against the wall. A man stood there. He was tall, easily 6'5", and built like a tank. He wore a pair of sweatpants she had left in the dryer, which were comically tight on him, and nothing else. His torso was a map of scars and defined muscle wrapped in her floral bedsheet bandages. His face was hard, angular, with a jawline that could cut glass and those same piercing golden eyes. "You," Harper squeaked. "You're a shifter." "And you," the man said, his voice a deep baritone that seemed to vibrate the floorboards, "are in a lot of trouble." Before Harper could ask what he meant, a heavy fist pounded on her outer door. "Harper, open up. I know you're in there." It was Brody, and he wasn't alone. Harper could smell the scents of 3 other enforcers. They must have found the blood trail in the snow. The man Dominic immediately shifted his stance. He didn't look afraid. He looked like a predator who had just been served an appetizer. "Hide," Harper hissed at him. "Please, if they see you, they'll kill you. You're a rogue in their territory." Dominic looked at her with an unreadable expression. "I am not a rogue." "Harper." The door shook as Brody kicked it. "I smell unwashed mutts in there. Open up, or I'll burn this shack down." Harper looked at the 15 men who had all shifted back into human form, now crowding her tiny room, naked and injured. "Into the boiler room," she ordered, pointing to the maintenance hatch in the floor. "Go now." The men looked to Dominic. He gave a sharp nod. They moved with military precision, disappearing into the sub-basement where the pipes ran. Dominic was the last one. He paused at the hatch. "Open the door," he told her. "Act scared. Do not fight him." "I don't need acting lessons for that," she whispered. Dominic dropped into the darkness. Harper smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and unlocked the door. Brody burst in, followed by 2 enforcers. He grabbed Harper by the throat and slammed her against the wall. "Where are they?" he spat. "We found the blood near the shed. We saw the tire tracks. You brought strays onto Alpha Silas's land." I found a deer," Harper lied, choking. "I hit a deer. I brought it back to butcher for meat. I was hungry. Brody sniffed the air. I smell wolf blood, Harper. And I smell something else. He frowned, sniffing deeper. He was smelling the Alpha King's scent, but it was so powerful, so dominant, that Brody's brain couldn't process it. He confused it for ozone or storm static. "Search the room," Brody commanded. The enforcers tore her room apart. They ripped the mattress, smashed her hot plate, overturned her small dresser. "Nothing here, Beta," one said. Brody's eyes narrowed. He looked at the rug where Harper had slept. He saw the bloody bandages she hadn't had time to hide. "Liar," Brody growled. He backhanded her. Harper fell to the floor, tasting blood. "You're hiding rogues, traitors." He pulled a handgun from his waistband. "If you don't tell me where they are in 3 seconds, I'm going to put a bullet in your kneecap. 1. "Please," Harper cried. 2. Bang. The gunshot was deafening in the small space, but Harper didn't feel pain. She opened her eyes. Brody was standing there looking confused. His gun was on the floor, still smoking. But his hand was gone. No, not gone. Broken. Bent backward at a 90-degree angle. Standing between Harper and Brody was the stranger. He had come up from the hatch so fast he was a blur. He stood casually holding Brody's wrist in one hand as if it were a twig. "You have a bad habit of counting," Dominic said, his voice calm and terrifyingly cold. "You should have stopped at 0. Brody screamed, dropping to his knees. "Who are you? Who do you think you are?" Dominic leaned down, his golden eyes flaring with alpha command. The air in the room became heavy, crushing, making it hard to breathe. "I am the one who is going to decide if you live to see lunch," Dominic whispered. "Now apologize to the lady." Brody looked up, sweat pouring down his face, pain warring with confusion. She's just an Omega." Dominic twisted Brody's wrist further. A wet snap echoed. "Apologize." "I'm sorry," Brody shrieked. "I'm sorry, Harper." Dominic released him. Brody scrambled back, clutching his mangled hand. "You're dead. You're both dead. Alpha Silas will peel the skin from your bones." Brody and his enforcers scrambled out the door, running for the main house to raise the alarm. Harper sat on the floor, trembling. You shouldn't have done that. They'll come back with the whole pack. They have silver. They have assault rifles." Dominic turned to her. The darkness in his eyes softened as he looked at her swelling cheek. He reached out his thumb, gently grazing the bruise. "Let them come," Dominic said. "It will save me the trouble of hunting them down." He turned to the hatch. "Gabriel, Lucas, get up here. Suit up." "Suit up?" Harper asked, bewildered. "With what?" Dominic smiled, a sharp, dangerous grin. "With the weapons we took from the mercenaries who tried to kill us. Harper, you didn't just save 15 wolves. You saved the Royal Guard." He paused, looking at the door where Brody had fled. "And now," Dominic said, "I'm going to burn this pack to the ground." The garage was no longer a place of refuge. It was a war room. Harper stood by the rusted workbench, watching as 15 men transformed from wounded animals into a military unit. It turned out they hadn't just been running blindly in the snow. They had managed to salvage gear from their wrecked SUVs before the blizzard buried them. Gabriel the Beta was snapping a tactical vest over his chest. His arm was in a sling made from Harper's pillowcase, but he moved with terrifying efficiency. Lucas the Gamma was checking the magazine of a heavy pistol. "We have enough ammo for a skirmish, not a siege," Gabriel reported, his voice rough. "But we have the element of surprise. Silas thinks we're dead, and he thinks this boy," he gestured to the door where Brody had fled, "is dealing with a couple of stray dogs." Dominic stood in the center of the room. He had found a pair of mechanic's coveralls hanging on a hook. They were stained with oil and grease, but on him they looked like royal armor. He radiated a dark, pulsing energy that made the air hum. He turned to Harper. "You said there's a back way into the main house." Harper nodded, clutching her thin coat tighter. "The servants' tunnel. It connects the boiler room to the kitchen pantry. It's how we move supplies without the guests seeing us. But Alpha, Dominic, there are 50 enforcers in that house. And Silas, he's strong." Dominic stepped closer, towering over her. "Silas is a bully who inherited his power. I fought for mine in the fighting pits of the southern waste. There is a difference." He reached out his hand, hovering over her shoulder. He seemed to want to touch her, to comfort her, but he held back. "You stay here. Lock the door. If we don't come back in an hour, take the jeep and drive south until you hit the border." "No," Harper said. The word surprised even her. Dominic blinked. "No. You don't know the layout of the house. You don't know where the silver grids are installed in the floor. You don't know where the armory is," Harper said, her voice gaining strength. "I've scrubbed every inch of that mansion on my hands and knees. I know where the floorboards creak. I know which cameras don't work. If you go in blind, you'll get hurt. And I didn't save you just to watch you die because you're too proud to ask for directions." A silence fell over the room. The other 14 wolves stopped what they were doing and looked at the Omega, who had just talked back to the Alpha King. Gabriel let out a low, impressed whistle. Dominic stared at her for a long beat. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had found his perfect hunting partner. "Fine," Dominic said. "Lead the way, Harper." They moved into the boiler room, descending into the steam tunnels. It was tight, dark, and smelled of rust. Harper took the lead, navigating the maze of pipes with practiced ease. Dominic stayed directly behind her, his presence a warm, protective weight at her back. "Why do you stay?" Dominic asked quietly as they moved through the dark. "If they treat you like trash, why haven't you run?" "They have my sister," Harper whispered. "She's 6. They keep her in the nursery ward. If I leave, or if I disobey, they said they'd put her in the training ring with the new recruits." A low growl vibrated through Dominic's chest, so deep it rattled the pipes overhead. "They threaten a child, their cold river," Harper said simply. "Cruelty isn't a bug, it's a feature." "Not for long," Dominic promised. They reached the end of the tunnel. Harper put a finger to her lips and pointed to a grate above. Light filtered through. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and jazz music drifted down. "That's the pantry," she mouthed, "just off the grand hall." Dominic signaled his men. They moved into position. "Harper," Dominic whispered, leaning close to her ear. "When this door opens, stay behind Gabriel. Do not look at Silas. Do not look at the blood. Just watch me." "Why?" "Because," Dominic said, his eyes glowing gold in the shadows, "I want you to see what happens to men who hurt what belongs to me." The grand hall of the Cold River Pack was a masterpiece of excess. A 20-foot spruce tree dominated the room, dripping with gold ornaments. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, towers of shrimp, and bottles of imported wine. Alpha Silas sat at the head table, a man of 50 with a receding hairline and a bloated red face. He was laughing at a joke made by one of his lieutenants, a half-eaten turkey leg in his hand. "So I told him," Silas bellowed, spraying crumbs. "If you can't pay the tithe, I take the daughter. Fair is fair." The table erupted in sycophantic laughter. Suddenly the double doors at the far end of the hall burst open. Brody stumbled in, cradling his broken wrist, his face pale as a sheet. "Alpha!" Brody screamed, silencing the room. The music cut out. "Alpha, we have a breach. The garage, the Omega." Silas stood up, his face darkening. "Brody, why are you interrupting my dinner? And what about the Omega? She has demons," Brody stammered, looking behind him terrified. "Monsters, they—" Boom! The wall behind the head table didn't just open, it exploded inward. The heavy oak door of the pantry was kicked off its hinges with such force that it flew across the room and shattered the ice sculpture of a swan. Splinters rained down on the guests. Screams erupted. Dominic Sterling stepped through the dust and debris. He was still wearing the greasy mechanic's coveralls, but the aura of power rolling off him was suffocating. It hit the room like a physical wave. Lesser wolves fell to their knees instantly, their instincts screaming, "Submit!" Behind him, 14 warriors fanned out weapons, raised, moving with lethal synchronization. Silas froze. He dropped his turkey leg. He recognized the man instantly. Everyone did. The scars, the size, the eyes. "Sterling," Silas whispered, his voice trembling. "But the reports. You were dead." "I got better," Dominic said calmly. He walked toward the head table. No one moved to stop him. The Cold River enforcers were paralyzed by the sheer weight of his Alpha command. "You attacked my convoy," Dominic said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "You used military-grade jammers. You hired mercenaries. You tried to execute the King of the West on Christmas Eve. It was a misunderstanding." Silas stammered, backing away until his legs hit his chair. "I didn't know it was you. I thought it was rogues." "Liar," Dominic said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. "You knew exactly who I was, and you left me to freeze." Dominic stopped at the foot of the dais. He looked around the room, his eyes landing on the terrified faces of the pack members. "This man," Dominic announced, pointing at Silas, "feasts while his people starve. He drinks while his Omegas freeze. He threatens children to keep his servants in line." Dominic turned back to Silas. "I challenge you." The room gasped. An Alpha challenge was ancient law. It could not be refused. I decline," Silas squeaked. "You are injured. You are a guest." "I am not a guest," Dominic roared, the sound shifting into a half-wolf snarl. "I am the executioner." Silas, realizing he was cornered, shifted. His clothes ripped as he transformed into a large, russet-colored wolf. He lunged at Dominic, jaws snapping for the throat. It was over in seconds. Dominic didn't even shift. He sidestepped the lunge with supernatural speed, grabbed the russet wolf by the scruff of the neck and the hind leg, and slammed him into the floor. The impact cracked the marble tiles. Silas yelped, thrashing. Dominic placed a heavy boot on Silas's neck, pinning him. He applied just enough pressure to cut off the air, but not enough to kill. "Shift back," Dominic commanded. "Now!" Silas shuddered and dissolved back into human form, naked and gasping for air under Dominic's boot. "Gabriel," Dominic called out. "Sir, secure the house. round up the council. Anyone who draws a weapon dies." "Yes, sir." Dominic looked down at Silas. "Now we are going to have a conversation about who paid you." From the shadows of the pantry door, Harper watched. She had never seen violence like this, so controlled, so precise. She should have been terrified, but seeing the man who had tormented her for years pinned under Dominic's boot, she didn't feel fear. She felt safe. And then Dominic looked up. Across the wrecked hall over the heads of the cowering guests, his golden eyes locked onto hers. "Harper," he called out. "Come here." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Harper walked forward, her heart pounding. She was wearing her rags covered in soot from the tunnel, but she held her head high. She stopped beside Dominic. "This," Dominic said to the room, his voice ringing with absolute authority, "is the woman who saved your king. While you drank, she carried my men through a blizzard. While you laughed, she bled to keep us warm." He looked at Brody, who was cowering under a table. "You called her trash," Dominic said. "From this moment on, she is under my personal protection. Anyone who looks at her wrong answers to me." He turned to Harper, his expression softening. "Where is the nursery? Where is your sister?" Harper felt tears prick her eyes. "Third floor, east wing." "Lucas," Dominic barked, "get the girl. Bring her here." As Lucas ran off, Silas wheezed from the floor. You can't do this. The council, they'll strip you of your title. You can't just take over a pack." "Watch me," Dominic said. "But first tell me, Silas, who gave you the jamming codes? Who sold me out?" Silas smirked, blood bubbling on his lips. "You think you've won. You think this is over. You have no idea what's coming for you, Sterling. The person who wants you dead, he's already here." The room went deadly silent. "What do you mean, here?" Dominic pressed his boot harder. "I mean," Silas choked out, his eyes darting to the crowd of guests, "that I wasn't the only one waiting for you." Dominic's head snapped up. He scanned the crowd. Hundreds of faces, terrified, confused. Suddenly, a slow clap echoed from the balcony overlooking the grand hall. "Bravo," a smooth, cultured voice said. "Truly a magnificent performance. I always said you had a flair for the dramatic, Dominic." A man stepped out of the shadows of the upper mezzanine. He was handsome, wearing a pristine white tuxedo that contrasted sharply with the carnage below. He held a champagne flute in one hand. Harper gasped. She recognized him. It was Councilman Blackwood. He was the regional overseer, the man responsible for enforcing pack law in the entire territory. He visited Cold River once a year to collect taxes. "Blackwood," Dominic snarled. "I should have known. You always did hate that I refused to increase the tithes." "It's not about the tithes, Dominic." Blackwood sighed, descending the grand staircase. He walked with a casual arrogance, flanked by 4 of his own personal bodyguards, men who looked even bigger than Dominic's warriors. "It's about order. You are a chaotic element. You let Omegas speak. You refuse to expand into human territories. You are stagnant." Blackwood reached the bottom of the stairs. "Silas was a blunt instrument," Blackwood admitted, looking disdainfully at the groveling alpha on the floor. "He was supposed to kill you in the snow and make it look like a tragic accident, but as usual he failed." Blackwood gestured to his guards. They raised assault rifles, not standard issue, but high-tech energy weapons that hummed with a violet light. "Silver nitrate pulse rifles," Blackwood explained. "Experimental. One shot destabilizes your cellular structure. You can't heal from it. You just melt." Dominic's men raised their weapons, but they were outgunned. The energy rifles were pointed directly at Dominic's chest. "Surrender, Dominic," Blackwood said. "Step away from the girl. I'll make her death quick. She's a loose end." Dominic didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He just stood in front of Harper, shielding her completely with his body. "If you want her," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register, "you will have to burn through me to get to her." "That can be arranged," Blackwood smiled. "Wait," Harper yelled. She stepped out from behind Dominic. "Harper, no!" Dominic roared, reaching for her. But she sidestepped him. She looked at Blackwood. She was trembling, but her mind was racing. She remembered something. "You can't kill him," Harper said, her voice shaking but clear. "And you can't kill Silas." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "And why is that little mouse?" "Because of the ledger," Harper said. Silas, still on the floor, went rigid. Blackwood's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "What ledger?" Blackwood asked, feigning boredom. "The one Silas keeps in the wall safe behind the portrait in his study." Harper lied. Well, it was a half-lie. She knew Silas kept a ledger there because she cleaned the study. She knew he recorded his illegal dealings. She didn't know if Blackwood was in it, but she was gambling on the fact that men like Silas always kept insurance. "Silas records everything." Harper continued, her confidence growing as she saw the flicker of doubt in Blackwood's eyes. "Every bribe, every order, every communication with you. He told me to burn it if he ever died." She looked down at Silas. "Isn't that right, Alpha?" Silas, realizing this was his only lifeline, nodded frantically. Yes, it's all there. Voice recordings, bank transfers. If I die or if Dominic dies here, it goes to the High Council automatically. I have a dead man's switch." It was a bluff, a desperate, clumsy bluff. But in the high-stakes world of wolf politics, paranoia was the ruling emotion. Blackwood hesitated. If the High Council found out he had orchestrated the assassination of a king, he would be executed publicly. "You're lying," Blackwood hissed. "Am I?" Harper challenged. "Are you willing to bet your life on the word of a man like Silas?" The tension in the room was electric. Dominic watched Harper with wide eyes. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a strategist. "Stand down," Blackwood ordered his men, his face twisting into a scowl. "We will discuss this." "No discussion," Dominic interrupted. He sensed the shift in power. He stepped forward, radiating dominance. "You are leaving. You are leaving my territory. And if I ever see you in the West again, I will rip your throat out myself, council or no council." Blackwood glared at Dominic, then at Harper. "You've made a powerful enemy today, girl." "Get in line," Harper said. Blackwood signaled his team. They lowered their weapons and backed away, retreating toward the exit. As soon as the doors closed behind them, the adrenaline left Harper's body. Her knees buckled. Dominic caught her before she hit the floor. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her against his chest like she was made of precious glass. "You," Dominic whispered into her hair, "are the most insane, reckless, magnificent creature I have ever met." "Did it work?" Harper mumbled against his neck. "It worked," Dominic said. He looked around the room at the Cold River Pack members who were now bowing their heads, accepting him as their new leader by right of conquest. Lucas came running into the hall, holding the hand of a small, terrified 6-year-old girl. "Lily," Harper cried, struggling to get down. Dominic set her down gently. Harper ran to her sister, hugging her tightly, sobbing with relief. Dominic watched them. The rage of the battle faded, replaced by a profound, aching sense of longing. He turned to Gabriel. Lock Silas in the dungeon. Find that ledger if it exists. If not, find whatever dirt he has. And get a medic for the girls. And what about us, sir? Gabriel asked. Do we return to the capital? Dominic looked at Harper, who was checking her sister for injuries, her hands gentle and loving. No, Dominic said. We're not going anywhere. I have a pack to fix. And... He touched the spot over his heart where the mate bond was beginning to burn. I have a queen to court. The days following the Red Christmas were a blur of activity that transformed the Cold River Pack forever. Harper woke up the next morning not on her thin rug in the boiler room, but in the master suite of the pack house. The bed was enormous, covered in silk sheets that felt like water against her skin. Sunlight, bright and piercing, streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the snow-covered valley. For a moment, panic seized her. She sat up, her heart hammering, expecting Brody to barge in and drag her to the scullery. She expected the cold draft of the garage. Then she saw him. Dominic was sitting in a velvet armchair by the fireplace reading a file. He had showered and shaved, wearing a fitted black turtleneck and dark jeans that accentuated the sheer width of his shoulders. He looked less like a warrior now, and more like a king, calm, composed, and utterly lethal. You slept for 14 hours, he said, his voice a low rumble that warmed her from the inside out. He didn't look up from the file immediately. I almost called the medic back, but your sister said you were just catching up on 10 years of missed sleep. Lily, Harper gasped, throwing the covers off. Where is she? She's in the kitchen, Dominic said, finally looking at her. His golden eyes softened. Eating pancakes. My beta Gabriel is currently trying to explain to her why she can't have chocolate chips for every meal. He is losing that argument, by the way. Harper slumped back against the pillows, letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a decade. I'm in the Alpha's bedroom. No, Dominic corrected, standing up and walking over to the bed. He sat on the edge, careful not to crowd her. You are in our bedroom. The air in the room grew heavy with unspoken things. The mate bond, that mystical biological pull that wolves felt, was vibrating between them. Harper had felt it the moment she touched his wound in the garage, but she had been too terrified to acknowledge it. Now, with the danger past, it was undeniable. Dominic, she started, her voice trembling. You can't just claim me. I'm an Omega. I have no lineage. I'm a servant. Dominic reached out his large, rough hand, cupping her cheek. Do you think I care about lineage? My father was a king, yes. But my mother was a rogue he found wandering the borderlands. Power isn't in the blood, Harper. It's in the spirit. He leaned closer, his thumb tracing her lower lip. You stared down a councilman to save my life. You bluffed a regional overseer with a lie about a ledger that might not have even existed. You are more of a queen than any high-born she-wolf I have ever met. About the ledger, Harper bit her lip. Did we find it? Dominic pulled back a grin, spreading across his face. It was a wicked, satisfied grin. Get dressed. You need to see this. They went down to Silas's private study. The door had been kicked in, likely by Lucas, but the room was otherwise intact. The wall safe was open. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were leather-bound notebooks and hard drives. You were right, Dominic said, picking up a black book. Silas was a paranoid coward. He recorded everything, not just Blackwood. Everyone. Judges, police chiefs, other alphas. He has evidence of money laundering, illegal land seizures, and trafficking rings. Harper ran her hand over the books. This is enough to take down half the council. It's enough to rewrite the laws of the entire Western Territory, Dominic corrected. Blackwood is finished. By the time he gets back to the capital, my hackers will have leaked this to every news outlet and pack elder in the country. He'll be lucky if he just goes to prison." He looked at Harper with a mixture of awe and respect. "You didn't just save 15 wolves, Harper. You just cleaned up the entire political landscape of the West." Harper felt a strange sensation in her chest. Pride. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just useful. She was formidable. "What happens to Silas?" she asked quietly. Dominic's face hardened. The warmth vanished, replaced by the cold, ruthless judgment of the Alpha King. "Come," he said. "It is time for judgment." The gathering took place at noon in the central courtyard. The entire Cold River pack, nearly 400 wolves, stood in a wide circle. The wind was howling, the temperature hovering near zero, but no one dared to leave. In the center of the circle, stripped to his underwear, kneeling in the snow, was Silas. Beside him was Brody. Both men looked broken. They were shivering violently, their lips blue. Dominic stood on the raised porch, Harper at his right hand. He wore a heavy, fur-lined coat, open at the chest, defying the cold. Harper was wrapped in a white cashmere coat that Dominic had ordered for her that morning. She looked like a vision of winter itself. "Pack of Cold River," Dominic's voice boomed without a microphone carrying over the wind. "For years you have lived under the rule of a man who valued gold over loyalty. A man who let his own people starve while he feasted. A man who abandoned allies to die in the snow." A murmur went through the crowd. Heads nodded. The resentment against Silas had been building for years. It just needed a catalyst to explode. "He tried to kill me," Dominic continued. "But his crime is not against me. His crime is against her." He gestured to Harper. "He took an orphaned child and made her a slave. He threatened her sister. He tried to break her spirit." Dominic looked down at Silas. "But you failed, Silas, because true strength doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from endurance." Dominic descended the stairs. He walked up to Silas. "The punishment for treason is death," Dominic said softly. Silas began to weep. "Please, please, King Sterling. Mercy. Mercy." Dominic tilted his head. "Did you show mercy when you sent Harper to the shed in a blizzard? Did you show mercy when you kicked my men while they were down?" Dominic turned to the crowd. "I will not kill him." Silas let out a sob of relief. "Death is too easy," Dominic said, "and I do not want his blood staining this snow. Instead, I sentence you to the fate you chose for us." Dominic pointed to the iron gates of the estate. "Exile," Dominic commanded. "You are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your name. You are stripped of your pack." He looked at Brody. "Both of you. You leave now. You take nothing. No cars, no coats, no money. You walk out that gate, and you keep walking." But it's 20 below," Brody shrieked. "We'll freeze." Dominic's eyes glowed a terrifying molten gold. "Then I suggest you start running to keep warm." He leaned in close to Silas, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You have 1 hour to clear the territory line. If my patrols find you after that, they have orders to hunt." Silas and Brody scrambled to their feet. They looked at the crowd, begging for help, for someone to toss them a jacket, a scarf, anything. But the pack turned their backs, every single one of them. The cooks, the maids, the warriors, whom Silas had bullied, they all turned around, presenting a wall of silence to their former tormentor. It was the ultimate rejection. Silas and Brody stumbled toward the gate, shivering, crying, disappearing into the white mist of the blizzard. They were never seen in the Western Territories again. Some say they made it to the human cities. Others say the cold took them just as it had tried to take the wolves they betrayed. Karma Harper realized as she watched them vanish was not just a concept. It was a cold, hard wind. 3 months later. The grand hall had been repaired. The broken wall was fixed, the marble floor polished, and the tacky gold ornaments replaced with elegant winter-themed decor. It was the coronation ball. Harper stood in front of a full-length mirror. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like the night sky. Diamonds, a gift from Dominic, sparkled at her throat. Her hair, once dull and brittle, was now glossy and styled in loose waves. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The fear was gone. "You look," a voice said from the doorway. "Like a goddess." Dominic leaned against the frame. He was wearing a formal tuxedo, his alpha medal pinned to his chest. He looked devastatingly handsome. He crossed the room and stood behind her, his hands resting on her waist, looking at their reflection. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "A little," Harper admitted. "There are alphas from 20 different packs downstairs. They're all waiting to see the Omega Queen." "Let them look," Dominic said fiercely. "Let them see what a real Luna looks like. You saved the king. You brought down the corruption in the council. You run this pack better than Silas ever did." It was true. In just 3 months, Harper had revolutionized Cold River. She had opened the food stores to the lower ranks. She had fired the abusive enforcers and promoted men like Gabriel and Lucas to train a new guard. She had turned the garage into a proper medical bay. Dominic turned her around. "Harper, I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, but it wasn't a ring. It was a pin. It was a small silver wolf, but unlike the standard pack pins, this one had eyes made of sapphires. "This was my mother's," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was a rogue, like I told you, but she was the bravest wolf I knew, until I met you." He pinned it to her dress right over her heart. "I, Dominic Sterling, Alpha of the Western Territories, reject all others." He recited the ancient mating vow, his eyes locking onto hers. "I claim you, Harper, as my mate, my queen and my equal. Your enemies are my enemies, your heart is my heart." Tears spilled down Harper's cheeks. She reached up her hands, tangling in his hair, pulling him down. "I, Harper, accept you," she whispered. "I claim you as my mate. Your soul is my soul." He kissed her then. It wasn't the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of survival they had shared in the garage. It was a kiss of promise, a kiss of a future built on respect, power, and a love that had survived the coldest winter in history. The doors to the balcony opened. Below in the great hall, hundreds of wolves looked up. When they saw Dominic and Harper emerge, hand in hand, the roar was deafening. It wasn't a polite applause. It was a primal howl of acceptance and joy. Harper looked out at the sea of faces. She saw Lily in the front row, waving frantically, holding a chocolate chip cookie. She saw Gabriel and Lucas standing guard, smiling. She looked at the snow falling gently outside the windows. It no longer looked like death. It looked like a clean slate. The Omega was gone. Long live the Queen. What an incredible journey for Harper. From a shivering, discarded Omega scraping grease in the scullery to the powerful Lunar Queen of the West. Her story proves that true nobility isn't about bloodlines. It's about the courage to do what's right, even when the world is against you. She didn't just save 15 wolves that night. She saved herself, her sister, and an entire kingdom from corruption. The fate of Silas and Brody serves as a chilling reminder. Those who leave others out in the cold may one day find themselves freezing alone. It's a classic tale of hard karma that feels so satisfying because Harper earned every bit of her happy ending through kindness and bravery, not manipulation. What would you have done if you found 15 giant wolves in your backyard during a blizzard? Would you have run, or would you have tried to save them like Harper did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of romance, betrayal, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.